Hello, welcome to the Crawcast. I'm your host, George Krawczak, and these are 10 players you do not want to draft in fantasy football. And I want to make this clear. I'm not saying don't draft these players if you can't get a good deal on them. Like, for example, if one of these players falls towards the end of the draft, then get them. But these are players that I think are way overvalued and going way earlier than they should be. And also, if you like this type of content, make sure to hit that subscribe button like it owes you money. At number 10, I have Travis Kelce. If you look at where he's being drafted currently, he's being drafted as the tight end one, and I just don't think that'll be the case next year. If you look at last year, he did not have a great season. He basically had two games, one where he had 179 yards and one where he had 124 yards. Other than that, he really didn't have that great of a season. Like, let me read you some games. All right, 4 catches for 26 yards. 3 catches for 14 yards, 5 catches for 28 yards, 5 catches for 44 yards, 3 catches for 16 yards. Those are several games where he was just not very good. And also, he is very old at this point, where I think there is a huge injury risk concern with Travis Kelce. So I would certainly not draft him as the tight end one, and I would definitely not use a first round pick or spend a lot of money on him if you're in an auction draft setting. At number 9, I have Kyren Williams. Again, this one isn't really his fault because he did have a really good season last year. The big problem is with this pick is that his backup is Blake Corum. I'm a huge fan of Blake Corum, and I think they're going to be more of a split system where it's going to be closer to 50-50 with a little bit more going to Kyren Williams as opposed to Kyren Williams being the lead back. And the number one reason why I say that is kind of the death nail to Kyren Williams is he is going to be their punt returner. You do not want your starting running back to be the punt returner because then that leads to less snaps on offense and it also leads to higher risk of injury. I've seen him go decently early in fantasy, and I just don't know why. I'm avoiding Kyren Williams almost at all costs because I think the backfield is going to be very split, and maybe even Blake Corum performs very well and takes over Kyren Williams. And number 8 is Puka Nacua. I've seen him slip into the second round in snake drafts, and I've also seen him go up to $40 in normal drafts. And that's really surprising with me because I think people are forgetting that Cooper Kupp was injured for a majority of last year, which led to Puka Nacua getting all the targets and all the receptions and all the yards. Whereas now that Cooper Kupp is coming back, I think this is going to transition back to Cooper Kupp's offense with Puka Nacua being a clear number 2. Granted, with Cooper Kupp, you still do have the injury concerns, but I think Puka Nacua is clearly not going to be the wide receiver 1 in that offense, and he's being drafted like a wide receiver 1. I'd recommend getting Cooper Kupp because I think he has just as much, if not more, production than Puka Nacua, and he is not going to cost as much. At number 7 is Josh Jacobs. Last year, he did not have a very good year, and in his defense, the Raiders overall were bad. They basically had no passing attack, their offensive line was horrible, and they were just horrible as a whole. But also, Josh Jacobs didn't perform well either, and so he does get at least a little bit of the blame on that. And the second reason why I'm avoiding Josh Jacobs is the Packers' offensive line. They are very good at pass blocking. They're probably one of the best pass blocking offensive lines in the NFL, but their run blocking is absolutely terrible. They cannot run block to save their life. And so so when you looked at last year when they had AJ Dillon and the whole offensive line is exactly the same except for at right guard. Look at last year AJ Dillon. AJ Dillon did not perform well, and I get it, he's more of a power back compared to Josh Jacobs, but again, they're a little bit similar in play style. Josh Jacobs is not the super shifty back that's required to kind of break tackles and when players come in unblocked because of the bad run blocking. And that's why I'm avoiding Josh Jacobs. At number 6, I'm avoiding any Texans receiver, and I'm mainly referring to Stefon Diggs, Tank Dell, and Nico Collins, especially towards the top of the draft. And the reason why I'm saying this is because, honestly, you really don't know the depth chart right now. Like, if you tell me Diggs is the number one receiver, I'd believe you. Number two, I'd believe you. If he is the number three, I'd believe you. Same with Tank Dell, same with Nico Collins. We simply just do not know what the target split is going to be between these receivers. Again, all of them could be decent, one could be terrible, one could be great. I simply don't know, and nobody knows. And so I think it's too risky if you're taking any of these guys towards the top of the draft because you simply just do not know who's going to get what targets. At number 5, I have Brandon Ayuk. Honestly, he did have a really good year last year. I want to make that clear. But I think it might be a little bit difficult for him to repeat it, given that there are so many stars on this team, because he's going to have to compete for targets with George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel. It does look like Ricky Pearsall is going to miss some time, so he doesn't have to compete with him just yet. But if Ricky Pearsall is able to play this season, that's another person that he'll have to compete with. And also, kind of like a little bit why I said Travis Kelce, he was very boom or bust last year. Let me read you some games. 3 receptions for 43 yards, 4 receptions for 58 yards, 3 receptions for 55 yards, 2 receptions for 50 yards, 5 receptions for 46 yards, 3 receptions for 37 yards, and 3 receptions for 25 yards. Overall, he only had 75 catches, so for a wide receiver 1, you at least want that in the 90 to 100 range for PPR leagues. So overall, I would avoid Brandon Ayuk. At number 4, I have Caleb Williams. And I want to make this clear. I'm not saying he's necessarily going to be terrible, but overall, rookie quarterbacks generally do not perform well. Like, look at CJ Stroud last season. He had probably one of the greatest rookie seasons of all time, and he only threw for 4,100 yards and 23 touchdowns, which is not very good for fantasy football. So unless Caleb Williams breaks kind of all the rookie trends, I just don't think he'll have that great of a season, and I would just personally avoid him if you can get a much better option at quarterback. At number 3, I have A.J. Brown. And I, again, think that he'll probably have a pretty decent season, but I've seen him getting picked at probably about the wide receiver 3 spot, and I just do not think that'll be the case, because with A.J. Brown, you also have to compete with Devontae Smith, who will definitely take a lot of targets, and also they just signed Saquon Barkley, which I think this offense will transition into a much more run-heavy offense instead of a pass-heavy offense. And also, he just had quite a few bad games, like 4 receptions for 29 yards, 1 reception for 8 yards, 5 receptions for 37 yards, and 1 reception for 9 yards, and 4 receptions for 53 yards. But he did have some of the best games of the season, which led to him having tons and tons of yards, finishing 5th. So this one I think is a little bit risky, and I just don't see it. And also, he is on the older side, so you do have to risk injuries, and I just gonna avoid him with the high draft pick and high cost he has. At number 2, I have C.J. Stroud. I've seen C.J. Stroud going as quarterback 2 or quarterback 3 in the draft, and I just do not know why, because I fully understand he had an amazing rookie season, and he does deserve credit for that he was really great as a rookie. But in terms of like the NFL average standards, I think people are way too high on him. He only threw for 4,100 yards and 23 touchdowns. If you put those stats on anyone else, like an Aaron Rodgers or a Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson, you'd be like, oh, that's not a very good season. And you also have to keep in mind his stats are a little bit inflated in the sense that he had one game where he threw for 470 yards and 5 touchdowns. So if you remove that one game, he really threw for like 3,600 yards and 18 touchdowns. I totally get that he has a great receiving core. And again, for a rookie, he was really, really good. But just in terms of your standard NFL production and your fantasy production, that is not very good. And also, he had only 167 rushing yards, so he provides almost 0 rushing upside. And at number 1, I have Derrick Henry. And the reason why I'm avoiding him is because a few reasons. Number one, he is old, and he is semi-injury prone. I get it, the Titans' offensive line was not good last year, but he did lead the league in carries and has been more or less run into the ground. And let me just read you off some stats in certain games. He had 11 rushes for 20 yards, 13 rushes for 43 yards, 11 rushes for 24 yards, 17 rushes for 34 yards, 16 rushes for 9 yards, and 12 rushes for 42 yards. He seems to be slowing down as well as having a lot of the wear and tear on his body to the point where I see him going as like the running back 2 behind McCaffrey, and I just do not see it. Also, he really doesn't have much of a receiving upside, where if you look at last year, he only had 28 catches for 214 yards. I'm avoiding Derrick Henry at all costs. Like, that is the number one player I'm avoiding. I do not think he'll have a good season this year, and I think he's more likely to get injured than not. So those are the players I'm avoiding in fantasy football. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you like this type of content, make sure to hit that subscribe button like it owes you money. I'll see you next time.